Hi, everyone. I am Deborah Cleland from Thrive. We are a support and advocacy group led by parents who have children who are deaf or hard of hearing. And really, we just stand for the full flourishing of all children who are deaf or hard of hearing. And we've been hosting a series of conversations which we hope will be nourishing, and we hope that they will be deeply inspirational to parents or caregivers or really anyone who's vested in the thriving of the life of a deaf or hard of hearing child. And today I am very grateful to have with me Shelley Ferreira. Shelley, welcome to Thrive.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Shelley, you really serve as a great inspiration to parents like myself. I always get teary. And you're a role model to so many of our children. And so really, just to kick off today, I would love to hear more about you as a person. I know that you were born deaf. I would love to hear a little bit more about your life and about you as a person. What makes you tick?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the introduction. I'm just going to backtrack and I'm just going to talk through it. So, as most of you know, I was born deaf. So my mom, she got a virus while she was pregnant with me. And she actually didn't know that she had the virus right until she had me on the day of the birth. And she still doesn't, to this day, doesn't even know how she picked up this weird virus. But this virus basically caused my deafness. It's called cytomegalovirus. So it does impact, well, it can cause blindness, deafness, and mental disabilities. So thankfully, I got the best out of the three. And my parents never really knew until I was about 2 years old, where they started noticing that I wasn't responding like a normal toddler would. And I wasn't saying a little bit of words or conversing in dialogue, and I should have been picking that up. And my parents then decided to take me to a doctor. And from then on, the doctor was able to say, your child is deaf because of the virus that you had. So we assumed that when I was born, around until that point of stage, I had the virus. What the virus impacted that? So we don't know if it actually did happen when I was 2 or when the day I was born, but we think it is from then. So what's basically happened is my left ear has got 0% hearing. So I can hear absolutely nothing in my left ear, and my right ear I've got about 30 to 40% hearing without my hearing aid. So to give you perspective of what I can hear, it's without my hearing aid, I can hear if you slam the door or if someone's mowing the lawn with a lawnmower. So I can hear a little bit of that sound without my hearing aid, but I can't hear normal speech at all. So it's very hard to explain what type of hearing that is because everyone's hearing is so different. And with my case, so I've got an opposite to most hearing people. I hear the high pitches, whereas most deaf people hear the low pitches. So I don't know if that makes sense to you. But,
Yeah, it does to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's also one of the reasons why I don't have such a big accent on my speaking. Is because I can hear the up and down and I can actually mimic that as well.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
something that my audiologist told me and I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
So then backtrack, my parents flew me to Cape Town. So back then, the only option was the Carol du Toit Centre. I don't know if you've heard of that organization. Yes. So back then, my parents only knew of that place. So they flew me down to Cape Town with them as well. And we went to a whole consultation, kind of like a workshop over 3 days where they teach you how to bring up your kid that's deaf and how to get them to speak, because I'd missed out on 2 years of my life of talking. And it was at that point where my mom decided to quit her job and to be a full-time stay-at-home mom to help me speak. And I think if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I am today. So a lot of this I do attribute to her and her dedication, always being there. And I think that is just so admiring to have a parent that's willing to help the kid. So that's like one big thing that I'm grateful for. And so I don't remember much, but my mom said she had to sit with Barbie dolls. and literally talk with each Barbie doll to show me how to speak and how to have a proper conversation, because I didn't understand how to say, I want something to drink. I would say, me wants something to drink. My mom would have to sit there for like so much time, just giving up her time every day, telling me how to like pronounce stuff and get better to where I am. And then I was fitted with a hearing aid, so that also helped a lot, where I was able to hear and I was able to lip read. So then, because I'd been talking a lot, I hadn't done any sign language. So my parents were thinking of sending me to a deaf school, but when we visited that deaf school, I wasn't able to talk to the other deaf kids because I didn't know sign language and they didn't understand me. So at that point, my mom was like, I think my daughter needs to go to a mainstream school. And I was sent to a mainstream school. It's a little school called Victory Christian Academy. So it was a co-ed school based here in La Lucia. Very small class, maybe like 12 people per grade. And I was there around until I was about 11 years old, and then moved to a bigger mainstream school called Our Lady of Fatima, which was an all-girls school. And that was a huge change, because going from something so small to something a lot bigger, having more kids in the classroom, it was a big change then. So I did from grade 5 to grade 12, matriculated. Then went to college for 3 years to study with a Master of Arts degree, because I'd always been passionate with creativity. So graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree. Then straight after that, got an internship at East Coast Radio, just doing all the designs, and it was amazing. And it was that point of time that I met my husband, who was also working there. So this was way back in 2011, quite a long time ago. And at that same point, I decided to enter Miss Deaf South Africa. And I saw an advert on Facebook pop up about the pageant. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. It's like a pageant just for deaf people. And I entered it because I wanted to meet other people like me. And I'd never ever come across someone who's deaf or who's had a hearing aid, or I don't know, I felt like I wanted to enter it just to meet them and just to like hear their story, where they're from, how they're doing. And I'm not just the only person that's deaf, because all my life I'd felt excluded from that world. So I was always only the deaf person in the class or the deaf person in the party. So that was just like a big thing for me to do. I didn't enter it just to win. I entered it to meet those people. And just before I entered it, I made an effort to learn the alphabet of the sign language so that I can introduce my name or say hello, like just the basics. And that week was probably the quietest week I've ever had in my life of the pageant, because everyone didn't speak. And I did not open my mouth once, and I picked it up quite easily. I started learning more of the language, such a beautiful language. And by the end of the week, I won the pageant, which was something I wasn't expecting. And I used that title to bridge the gap between the hearing and the deaf. So my whole vision was to make hearing people aware of deafness, the culture, and the sign language. And I felt like there was a big disconnect between the two worlds, and I wanted to bring them together and just bring awareness. And, even if you don't know sign language, you just know that that's how they communicate, and it must be so isolating. So I did all that, and then 2014, I decided to enter a hearing pageant. So purely as a challenge for myself, not to prove anyone else anything, but to show myself that I can enter it despite a disability. And I never told any of the organizers or the contestants that I was deaf. I just went full into it, not saying anything, until the night of the pageant, the crowning night. I told the MC that I was deaf, and I needed him to repeat the question in case I didn't hear on stage. That was my biggest fear, is not hearing something. And I'm on the spot with everyone watching. So it was like really scary moment. So then no one knew, and until that night. and I ended up winning that as well. And it was just something that I was so happy to accomplish. I just felt like I could achieve anything. And you don't have to tell people that you're different, you just blend in. So that was just something that I realized from that pageant. I didn't feel different, and it was almost like a little secret I was keeping to myself. Yeah, and it was great. And then got married in 2014. And 2017, I was invited to take part. Oh, I skipped the whole thing. I did take part in Miss Deaf World straight after Miss Deaf South Africa. That was incredible. Also met all these people from all over the world, different cultures, different backgrounds, different sign language. So they all had their different languages, which was quite mind-blowing. So I entered that, didn't win, but I came in the top 5, which was still something. And then, sorry, can I skip that whole part? And then in 2017, I was asked to go back and do a deaf fashion show at the same place in Czech Republic. And that was also lovely, just being there, surrounded by people, and all not talking but using our hands, and it's beautiful. And now, fast forward, I'm here today. So I'm a designer at a company, an international company called Jellyfish. And I'm loving it. So that's pretty much my whole life in like a short amount.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Sorry if I rushed that a bit.
No, that's it's such a I didn't know this before, but your story is very similar to the story of my daughter, because she also we didn't know that she was deaf until she was sort of between 2 or 3 was the time when we discovered that. And so I can completely put myself in the shoes of your mother. I understand why she gave up her work. And, what we always say at Thrive is that anybody, any child, whether they use sign language, whether they're oral, regardless of the economic standing, regardless of any other factor, the most important thing that will determine the successful outcomes for your deaf or hard of hearing child is it's you, the parent, the caregiver, and your investment. That is the most fundamental thing. So at times, I think for a new parent that's just discovered that their child is deaf or hard of hearing, it can feel like a burden, but actually it's a wonderful, beautiful, empowering thing once you have all the tools and the information that enables you to navigate all those unknowns and all the overwhelm that you face at first. So I didn't know that before, but that's really interesting and special to me. And I love what you say about your vision to bring the deaf and hard of hearing worlds together. I just feel so much about being deaf or being hearing. So much about being a human being is just about connection. And Bianca and I spoke about this concept of connection and how important it is in one of our previous conversations. But it still comes down, to this level, connecting deaf and finding. And it can be a really sort of political agenda. Do you sign? Do you talk? And instead of focusing on how we're different, to focus on the unity in the diversity of it all. And I think that's if the whole world could just move into that space of connection, despite how we might be different, that's where we will find unity in the world, and I just think so many of the whole problems of the world will be resolved if we all embrace that. So I think it's a beautiful vision. It's a beautiful vision. So thank you for that. I agree with you that sign language is a beautiful language, and I do understand, when you said that your mom took you to one of the schools for the deaf and everybody was signing. It is very challenging for a hearing parent or a speaking family to learn a brand new language. I think people often underestimate how difficult that is. So I completely get that. But I mean, for us as a family, I have my daughter is also oral. That was her choice. We embrace both sign language and oral language, and she's now bilingual. You know, which is amazing. And it's such a beautiful language. Yeah, I love it. So my daughter has recently, we've recently enrolled her in a mainstream school. And so I'm really interested to hear from you. What was your experience? What was some of your sort of deep experiences of being in a mainstream school and being the only deaf person? What was especially challenging? What did you especially love? And just generally, how was your day to day in that setting?
It was such a long time ago. But for me, I'd say the most challenging part was having teachers talk, but they turn their back and they would write on a chalkboard, but carry on speaking to the chalkboard and not looking at you. And it was so frustrating. That was probably the most difficult thing, because most of the kids in my class would hear that with no problem at all. But I rely a lot on lip reading and facial expressions and having the voice projected on me. And because I'm only one-sided, I can't pinpoint where that sound's coming from. So for me, it was even worse, having just one ear working and trying to hear where it's coming from and what she's saying at the same time. So that was definitely challenging, but I was lucky enough that the teachers were very accommodating. I always had to remind them that I need to see them, that I need to be the focal point of view. I would always request to sit in the front or the second row in the back. I mean, second row from the front, so that I could see the teacher at all times, and it's loud enough for me. And thankfully, they were always happy to let me sit there, and there was no problem with that at all. And I would say the best part about school, and it's so weird thinking back to school and wishing it was over, but so I'm a very creative person. So for me, art was my way of expressing myself, and it kind of became a medium for me at school. So I loved art, chosen it as my subject. I'd spend hours in the classroom just painting and drawing. That was kind of my stress reliever. So I loved that. That was like my favorite part of school, because I didn't have to listen to a teacher. I could just do my own thing. When it came to challenging things, so going back onto that, I do remember a teacher saying that we had a test the next day, a maths test, and I completely misheard it. I didn't know that there was a test until the next day. My friend asked me if I'd prepared for the test. And I remember thinking, she didn't say there was a maths test. And my friend was like, no, she said it. And she said it loud enough so you would have heard. She said that to me, and I was quite taken aback. And I was like, well, if I didn't hear it, surely it wasn't vocal enough. And I remember that lunch break, I just studied my heart out. I had to prove it wrong. I had to do this test. Ended up doing the test. The next day we got our results back. That same girl turned around to me and she asked me what I got. And I was like, oh no, I got an A on the test. And she kept quiet. So I was like, what did you get? She's like, she didn't want to tell me. So she had expected me to do worse because I didn't hear what the teacher said to prepare for the exam. And it was challenges like that, like kids not knowing what it's like and not knowing that you have to listen twice as hard as they do to know what was going on. I think there was a lot of misconceptions about being deaf and them not understanding or being in my shoes and not feeling. Like it's very hard for someone else to feel what you're feeling if Absolutely. They don't have it. So yeah, so that was quite challenging as well, like getting them to be on the same page as you. But I did have a lot of other friends who were more than happy for me to look at their notes and to copy anything down that I've missed. And it was friends like those that I'm still best friends with them today, even after being in school. And if it wasn't for them, I probably would have struggled a lot more. But just to have their kindness, and they were the ones who understood. But you did get the few that were just not nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you could offer some advice to a teacher, possibly in a mainstream school, who has a student in her class who is hard of hearing, what advice would you offer her to optimize the learning environment for that child?
So I'd definitely say patience is number one. Just to be patient. I know that a lot of the times I've had to ask teacher to repeat something, or after class I would go up and say, sorry, I missed this section. What did you say again? And I would just say just to be patient and offer as much support as you can. Yeah, I mean, it is hard already being a teacher with a class full of kids, and you've now got to like worry about that one person who needs that extra attention. But it really makes all the difference if you just know that, well, the deaf person knows that you're supporting them and they don't feel like they are a burden, if that makes sense. So
Absolutely makes sense.
they need to feel that they always can approach you with a question or yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, I never had that. Yeah.
And I think what we so often say is that if a teacher is accommodating a child who has sort of different needs or additional needs in a classroom setting, it always benefits the other children.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
That's the thing. So I think you spoke there about you know questioning a teacher if you didn't hear something, or approaching her afterwards, and I think it's a wonderful example of advocating for yourself, and it's something that I'm always sort of doing that with my daughter. She needs to know that she needs to advocate for herself on a daily basis if she needs to. The teacher certainly knows that she might get asked once or twice about something that she's already spoken about. She'll need to repeat things. But I just think it's such an amazing skill set to have almost the confidence to be able to ask if you don't understand things.
Yes.
And it sounds like such an obvious thing, but I think there are so many children that are not deaf or hard of hearing who are hearing and sort of normal in the sense of whatever that means. But they need that skill too, don't they? Because they don't always.
Yeah, definitely.
Everybody's going to miss things. In our entire lives, we're going to. But to have the confidence to say, I didn't get that, or everybody else seems to know what's going on, but I don't understand. To have the confidence and actually the courage to say that and to speak to that, I think it's an incredible life skill for any child.
Definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you could offer any sort of gems of wisdom to a child, a friend who might have somebody in their class who is deaf or hard of hearing, what would you offer that child?
I would probably say the same thing, just to be patient and understand that they're not able to hear just as well as you can, and they do need a little bit more time just to pick up what is being said or translated. Like I said, my best friend, she was just amazing. So anything that I felt I missed out on, she would just give me her notes, and I was able to take it and just write down anything that I thought I had missed out on, because she would write down everything. She was so good. So I think always be willing to help out. If they need your help, don't make them feel like they're being stupid for not understanding or not hearing something. That's the worst thing. But to always embrace it and understand why they need the help. It's always hard to think like that, though. But,
and I think also what also rings true completely, just hearing you say that, is that again, that is amazing advice for any child with any need, whether they're typical needs or non-typical needs or special needs or whatever it is. Because really, there might be a child who presents themselves as completely normal, but actually they might have had a really rough morning. Maybe they're struggling to concentrate at school. Maybe their parents are going through a tough time. Maybe they don't integrate socially really well. Maybe they're feeling anxious that day for whatever reason. And these are all the things that are great gems or pieces of advice for any child. And I think, we so often talk about, what is your passion? What are you going to do with your life? How are you going to contribute to the world? And all these big things that we talk about nowadays. But actually, I feel it's not even so much about those great, grand things that we're going to achieve in our lives, but how are we as friends going to conduct ourselves every day to make our fellow humans feel connected to us, feel connected to each other, and to bring the kindness, to bring the love, to bring the understanding into the classroom. So, a 10-year-old kid can contribute to the world so greatly just in that moment of including somebody else who might be struggling that day.
Yes, definitely.
And I'm sure at school you might have had days where you struggled more than others. But certainly on those days where you were struggling, to have just that one person to stand for you, to stand by your side and to be there for you doesn't it make the world of difference? The absolute world of difference.
That's so true. It is so true.
Yeah.
It just starts off with kindness. As long as someone's kind, it definitely can make, like you say, the world of difference.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Now that I'm thinking back, there have been a few times where someone's been just so nice, and it just makes you feel so much happier to be there, or not so stupid as you think you are, but you're not stupid. But
no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Totally.
Cool.
And then I'd like to ask you, have you or your mom maybe, or one of your parents or caregivers ever had to advocate for you, ever had to sort of fight, but maybe that's the wrong word, but really advocate for you to receive equality in treatment or equality of services in any way?
Yes, so I think I was in grade 7, so I was about 13, just getting into my teenage years, and it got to the point where there was a lot of peer pressure, a little bit of bullying, not me in particular, but in the office with a lot of people. And my mom at the time thought it would be a good idea to send my audiologist to come do a talk at the school. To give awareness of deafness and hearing aids, what it's like being deaf, explaining the whole decibel charts, why I'm deaf, all of that. And it was just an hour of her talking about all these things, and it was just so nice for everyone to understand exactly what had happened to me, why I'm deaf, why I'm feeling this way. And that was what my mom had to do in order to make people realize, it is really hard for you. It is a lot harder for you to hear. And I remember straight after that presentation, a lot of people would come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, I did not know that about you. Or they would just ask me advice and how I'm feeling. And they genuinely did want to know why and how I'm coping. And it was just a really good shift of perspective. And I think it was great to have that. I actually think most schools should have something like that, because not a lot of people understand how it works, how your hearing aid works, all of this. And it's very complicated. So
and I think a lot of people also think that if you put hearing aids or implant a child with a cochlear implant, that they all of a sudden are a hearing person. So that's the assumption, but actually that's not the reality. That person still needs the accommodations. They still experience life differently. Some things great, some things not great, but the experience of life is different. And I think it's great we're talking about this in September, because this is Deaf Awareness Month.
Yes.
It's also interesting you say that, because my plan was to go and address the school about exactly what you've said. What does it mean for someone to be hard of hearing in this setting? How is their life different? What might they struggle with? what's the upside to all of this? You know, how do they gain as a deaf person? And then also to talk about inclusion and the beauty of inclusion, what deaf anxiety can feel like. And but of course, we've with all the sort of corona restrictions, I've not been able to do that. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to write an article for the girls at the school.
That'd be
and
amazing.
I think, yeah, so I just think that for any parent listening, I think that's it is a wonderful thing. And as you've said, it can make it's that little shift. So much of this is so subtle, that subtle shift in perspective of everybody, understanding. So yeah, thank you for that.
And just touching on that point, my mum, she said she also noticed the minute I started high school, so grade 7, grade 8, I was coming home a lot more drained, a lot more tired, had no energy. And when she approached my audiologist about it, she was like, actually, it's because she's straining to hear, she's using all her energy just to try hear what's being said. And that's also another misconception that not a lot of people know, is that it does drain you when you're trying to understand and comprehend, and your brain's working and your hearing aid as well. It's a lot.
Absolutely.
So that's like a bigger mental load than we have, I think.
Totally. And the fatigue that goes with that is immense, actually. And it's not something that we speak about all the time. And even for me, that is such a fantastic reminder for my daughter, because I completely forget that you know, she will come home fatigued. She will be working harder every minute of every day in a hearing environment to be able to catch on to what's going on, to make sure she doesn't miss anything. Absolutely. Shelley, I wanted to ask you, Bianca and I did a session a few weeks back talking about deaf anxiety. And you know what that is, it's that the sort of burden that a deaf person, and especially I think a deaf person that's in a hearing environment and in an oral environment, the expectation of them just to cope with everything and to constantly adapt themselves to fit in with a situation and a world that's not actually designed specifically for their needs. Is that something that you feel you've experienced throughout your life?
Oh, all the time. I mean, like, it sounds stupid, but if I was going to a restaurant to meet a whole bunch of people, I will specifically choose where I'm sitting at the table, only because I'm one-sided hearing. So I would make sure that I'm sitting so that my hearing aid's this way and everyone's sitting to the right of me. And that is an anxiety already, because I'm already thinking about, I need to choose a place to sit, I need to make sure I'm hearing people, I need to make sure that I'm not going to miss out, especially in big groups. So that's, and
there's of course there's so much background noise as well in those settings. So
that's also a big thing, trying to make sure I'm looking at each person, which is probably why I also prefer smaller groups. I do get a lot of anxiety when I'm with big groups of people. I'm trying to think what else. Calling as well. I hate picking up the phone to call to make an appointment. I still get my mom to do it once every now and then for me because I get such anxiety that I'm not going to hear, and then I'm going to sound stupid to the person on the phone. Especially when I'm asking them to repeat themselves, they get frustrated. So that's
of course. And I mean, I'm even noticing that now with everyone wearing masks. Firstly, I mean, that must be, I can just imagine what a nightmare that is for you. But I mean, even for me as a hearing person, I'm finding I'm nodding and smiling when I have no idea what people have actually said, because I can't hear them. And I've already asked them once, and then I don't want to ask them. I'm like, even if I ask them again to repeat themselves, I'm still not going to hear. So, because there's too much noise or whatever. So, I mean, that's just really given me a flavor of that. And it does make you feel quite anxious. You know, you get the sort of beating heart, thinking, gosh, I hope I have responded appropriately to the situation. Because I don't really know what's going on here.
Or if someone says something, I get this often where they say something and it sounds like something else. So I'm responding in that question, and they're like, I didn't say that. It
Yes.
happens a lot with me, so that's quite embarrassing, but
Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's such, it's really lovely to have met you. And, it is, I think as a parent, when you first discover that your child is deaf, I would say there are certainly two areas of support that you should go to. And the first is, make as many friends as you can with other parents who have children who are deaf or hard of hearing. And it's amazing how, certainly in our organization throughout, because we are made up of parents or caregivers who all have children who are deaf or hard of hearing. So the friendships, it's amazing how everything else, every other difference you might have with someone falls away when you realize you are both parents of children who are deaf, because there's just something so special about that connection and the support that it gives you to kind of get over the bad days and to feel like you can take the next step when you feel overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, or you feel guilty, or you feel you're so scared of making the wrong decision for your child. And I'm sure a lot of the stuff that your mom went through, but to have other parents alongside you who are going through the same thing, and to know that you are not alone is massive.
That's so true.
And it sounds similar to what you spoke to earlier about wanting to meet other deaf people, to know that you are not alone. So, and the second thing I would certainly say to a new parent is find deaf role models. Find a deaf mentor or a friend that you can make with someone, and allow your child opportunities to meet and see that person, to see their success, because it's incredible how much energy that gives you to move on and continue, and inspiration. So thank you, Shelley, for being that inspiration to me, and
thank you.
to so many other parents out there. It would be lovely. I'd love to meet your mom one day.
She actually wanted to be here for the interview, but it's her birthday today and she's away. So she would have loved to. I told her all about it, and she definitely said she would love to speak and reach out to anyone else, any other
and
parents.
I think what would be lovely is for us to do an interview like this with your mom. I would love that. So we'll be in contact, and I can get your details. And I
think
also
that'll be great.
I hope that you can sometime in the near future also meet my daughter, who would just also, I think I told you, she's a fashionista, and she is going to be a fashion designer one day, I'm sure. And she would love to meet you. So hopefully we can set that up.
Yeah, definitely. And it would also be nice to also chat to my mum from the perspective, because she's got a lot more insight than what she's been through than what I have. So I can't imagine all the running around she's done and dedication, and it'll be great to talk about that as well.
Clearly done a wonderful, superb job with you. So hats off to her.
Thanks. Cool.
Yeah, Shelley, thank you so much. We're so deeply grateful for your time and your energy and your open-heartedness to have this conversation, and really, your inspiration to all of us.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This is really awesome. This is really good. I hope that I spoke enough and gave enough advice.
You're perfect.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.